Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. And as you will look around, you will notice once again we are on a different set, and that is because we are not taping at BCTV. We are taping at CastleHill Media here in Bedford, New Hampshire. Many reasons why we've chosen to do that, not the least of which deals with show ownership and copyright. But here we are, and we'll have a great show for you today, and lots of new things happening. And this show will be up very quickly for you to view, and it will be announced on Patch and such because you'll be able to see it on YouTube very quickly. So anyway, today we have a very interesting topic. Some of you will remember that back in September, I taped a show called, we didn't know what to call it, so we made it easy and called it Law and Order, in which Chief John Bryfonski of the Bedford Police Department was the guest. And of course you can see with our new set that my guest is not invisible. He's already sitting here very patiently. And it was a well-received show. And during that one, Chief Bryfonski was good enough to talk about all the new innovative programs that have started here in Bedford in the past year that the police department has been responsible for and created and so on. And one of them near and dear to my heart as well. And in any event, of course, now lots of things are happening. And today's technology is such that, you know, police departments have to be up on technology as much as anybody does. And in fact, probably more so to protect public safety and to protect their own staffs. So a lot has been going on in the whole technology field at the Bedford Police Department, so it seemed perfectly reasonable to now ask the chief to come back and to do a show all about high-tech policing, which is what we'll call this show. And I think you'll find it very fascinating, and it will be kind of a show that's not going to be over in a half an hour. We're going to have different segments because there's so much to talk about. And if we look a little windblown, it's because during this show you're going to see a segment that we just did outside with one of the new Bedford police cruisers, and that alone is worth hanging in to watch the rest of the show for. So anyway, the whole subject of the show is to tell you about how the Bedford Police Department has and continues to integrate technology to improve both the public safety for all of us, all residents of Bedford, all residences and all businesses in Bedford, and even more importantly, to protect the safety of those who serve us in the police department. So, with that, Chief, thank you so much for coming back on.
My pleasure.
Glad to see you and hear you, and I know you've had an extremely busy week. So I appreciate, you must be at this point just dying to take a good nap somewhere.
Well, it would be nice, but we don't get very many naps in this line of work.
I
so.
know that.
But yeah,
I know
we've been very busy. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on the show and explain to our residents how their tax money is being spent and how we're trying to extract as much utility as we can out of our resources by employing technology wherever we can.
Well, I know that one of the things that you're noted for, and I've heard even some of your people in your own department say that you are a stickler on detail, you're a stickler on knowing, you know, exactly what goes on, statistic-wise, number of calls, what kind of activity increases there have been with the police department and such. And obviously, I mean, Bedford has grown, there are more residents, there are more situations, so obviously the police department calls for service keep going up, the activity level for every officer continues to go up. So, I mean, I know I've heard you say that kind of translates to requiring a lot more increased efficiencies and also creates some limitations because of the fact you're getting bombarded with lots of extra work and all of that tying into technology. So kind of with that lead in, I'm going to say to you, go for it. Start, you know, telling us what has gone on in town that has made you feel even stronger about the need for Bedford to be at the top of the technology ladder.
Well, when I first got here over a year ago, and it seems like it's gone by in a blur.
I know.
And
It
it
is
really has
over
been
a year.
really has been a quick year. But you know, oftentimes you learn an awful lot by just sitting down and having a chat with folks. And certainly I did that with all the command staff in the beginning and then with the officers. And one of the common themes that was woven through a lot of those conversations was it just seems like it's an awful lot busier than it used to be a year ago, a couple of years ago, and certainly a lot busier than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And so as a result of sort of hearing that and having folks talk about the fact that it's no longer possible to devote the time and to have extra people available for certain things because they are being pulled from one direction to another constantly, I thought that, well, let's take a look at what the numbers show. And one of the things that I first learned was that when you throw all the numbers into one pot, it becomes homogenized. And so that's sort of the statistical picture that I first saw when I looked at total activity for the department. There was an accounting of everything that was being done, but it was homogenized. It was blended together. And one of the first things I wanted to do was to separate out the ingredients of that mixture and find out where the burden was coming from that was being placed on our officers in the department. And it took some time to do that, and technology was one of the key pieces that played an integral role in allowing us to be able to separate those pieces and allow us to be more precise about actually what was going on in Bedford. Thankfully, the department already had in place a fairly robust internal management system, and as a result, we were able to begin to use different pieces and modules, as they call them, in a different way, so that when we extracted those numbers, we could then differentiate between the activity that officers were initiating themselves versus those calls that were coming into the department over which we have no control over, which I call calls for service. Calls for service, the analogy I always use is the garden hose with no handle on it, which means that somebody is controlling how much water is coming out of that garden hose. Some days and sometimes it's a trickle and sometimes it's a gush. And we have to be able to be prepared for that gush of water. That gush means that people are calling us and needing our officers to respond for sometimes life-threatening, life-endangering situations. We've got to be there for them. We also have to make sure that we have enough reserve capacity so that when our officers are deployed on life-endangering or life-threatening situations, that there's enough reserve capacity to protect them. So as a result, the first few months was trying to get a good statistical picture where we were. And we used technology to do that. We purchased some additional pieces that allowed us to be able to analyze our numbers better. We just purchased another piece, another module called crime mapping. In fact, today, our town's information technology director was in the police department installing different programs on select machines that's going to allow us to be able to extract further data, overlay that onto a mapping module so that we'll be able to graphically depict where our activity is, what kinds of activities are occurring in certain places. And so that gives us a better spatial and situational awareness quotient of understanding exactly where all this work is coming and what we have to do to be prepared to handle it in the future.
So then, in other words, when you have this overview, would you be able to see things, for instance, like, and I'm pulling things out of my hat here, that maybe on 101 might be kind of whatever way it is visible to you, where the traffic stuff would be, whereas maybe shoplifting incidences might be over here in the location of such and such a store? That kind of mapping, you're able to do that?
That kind of mapping, it'll be able to. Well, we look at, and I think in the first show I talked about how I have prioritized the work for the department. We have crime, we have highway safety, and then we have community programs.
All right.
And so we have these three pieces, and so we'll be able to look at, for example, in terms of highway safety, where our higher numbers of accidents are occurring. It'll be able to graphically depict those intersections that are more problematic.
Okay.
And we'll be able to devise strategies that will reduce and mitigate. We all know that traffic backs up coming into 101, 114 intersection. The idea here is to develop a strategy that will then mitigate the number of rear-end collisions. Is it distracted driving? Is it folks that are speeding as they're coming off the interstate section and then abruptly stopping and not being able to, and eventually causing a rear-end collision?
So it's tracking all the statistical,
Traffic-
anecdotal information as well?
Total information as
Wow.
well, and it'll also allow us to determine where our resources are being deployed, so that, for example, if we have a high level or high number of accidents, we'll be able to overlay that on a particular map and see whether or not our resources are being deployed consistent with the amount of activity that's at a particular location. The other area that we're really interested in is taking a look at crime patterns and trends, particularly burglaries, things of that nature, so that we can graphically overlay those onto a map and look at years of activity, months of activity, days of activity, so we can identify different trends, clusters, and then put in different parameters. Let's say we want to look at certain crime patterns that occur on certain days of the week during certain times of the day. By a few computer strokes, we'll be able to pop those up. And from that spatial and graphic display, it'll be immediate notification to us that we either have a trend or we don't have a trend. Is it dispersed, or is it something that follows a pattern? And if it is a pattern, then we more precisely deploy our resources to address that particular problem. It's predictive policing. In other larger departments in the West Coast, they're using very expensive software programs. What we're doing here is using our own experience, some basic information technology improvements in our own department, and then from that developing strategies to make sure our officers are where they're likely to be needed before they're actually needed, to prevent crime and deter crime as opposed to trying to solve it after it occurs.
Which obviously makes a huge amount of sense.
Sure.
Now, you know, now obviously, I mean, just the fact the town has grown and the population has grown and everything has grown, the number of people coming into town every day, the driving through or to work, you know, at a workplace or whatever, obviously there would be increases in various incidences. I mean, it kind of goes with the turf. As a, you know, as a police chief, and I don't know if you could just identify Bedford or in general, does crime also, this is kind of a curiosity question, does crime also increase based on just the crazy economy? That you know, more desperate people floating around doing more desperate things, crazy things?
I've kind of looked at, not kind of looked at, I have looked at numbers nationally. To be able to get a feel for those sort of trends, you have to have a fairly large set of numbers to be able to deduce whether or not there's any correlation. And what I've seen recently is that the common notion was that when the economy was poor, that property crime would go up. And nationally, that's actually not been the case in many places of the country.
Really?
Property crime has actually been fairly flat, and it's actually declined in some particular areas. So it's a sort of an unusual paradox where the common sense notion would suggest that as the economy was poor, it would drive more people to commit property crime. But that actually hasn't been the case. So it's interesting to look at the different factors that influence different types of crime. I've been around long enough to remember different types of those types of factors. When I was a police officer back in East Hartford, Connecticut, it became legal to buy and sell gold and silver for the first time. And all of a sudden, we, along with virtually every other police department, everywhere, not only in Connecticut, but everywhere else, suffered a surge of residential burglaries. People were stealing silver sets. They were stealing anything, gold, jewelry,
I remember that.
things of that nature. You know, before there was no place to exchange a piece of gold or silver for money.
And now all of a sudden they could do it almost anywhere.
Right, and as a result, the burglary rate literally skyrocketed in East Hartford, and so we had to change the way that we were looking at doing business in connection with burglaries. We put together a separate unit that just looked at that particular crime problem until we got a handle on it and dealt with it. So there are a lot of external factors that influence different crime patterns. The economy may be one, maybe changes in gold and silver prices. It could be sometimes we attribute changes in climate, we attribute changes in crime patterns to whether we're having a mild or a severe winter. You know, we track different types of crime based on the changes in time standards. You know, because we have the days are getting shorter. It's easier to be, you know, conduct your business if you're going to be a crook and not be seen. So,
Yeah, true.
so we change.
Instead of waiting till later 9 at night, you can do it at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Correct. So we have to change with those patterns and adapt to them and be ahead rather than behind in terms of catching up to what's going on. So a lot of these technological changes, some that we've already got in place and some that we hope to purchase in the future, is going to allow us to be more predictive and more precise in how we use our resources. One of the other modules that we hope to purchase is going to be one that will spatially depict on a map and a large screen in our communication center where every Bedford cruiser is, so that when a call comes in,
At any given time.
at any
You can
given
just look at
time,
that screen?
it'll indicate
Neat.
whether the cruiser is stationary, it'll show if the cruiser is moving, it'll show whether or not they've been sent to a call, it'll show whether or not that they are actually on a call. The neat function about that is that while we have sectors where officers are assigned to patrol, oftentimes you may be in one sector, but
Sure.
at the far end
far
of its
end of it.
terminus,
Sure.
and another sector's car may be actually closer to a call in another sector. This will be able to reduce our response time, which is already very good, to even a better response time, because you'll be able to see, and the computer will able to be able to
zone right in on it.
It'll pick the closest cruiser that's available to go to a certain call.
Boy, that's you know, those kind of things are amazing.
And it's an officer safety issue as well.
Of course, yeah.
You know, if something, God forbid, were ever to happen to a police officer, we would know where that car
Exactly
is.
where he
Yeah,
is.
if an officer is not in motion for a long period of time, the software will be able to detect that and tell the communication specialist that you may want to check the status of that officer. We do that already based on an audible signal and a preset time frame, but now we'll also be able to see it on the map.
That's amazing. You know, because I think we've all seen TV shows at one time or another where there'd be a hostage situation or something, and there'd be this all-out search going on, and sometimes involving a police officer, and people would not know where that officer was because he was one of the victims. So that totally changes all that.
Totally changes the picture. It provides greater situational awareness for the communication specialists. They know where their officers are. The sergeant and the officer in charge of the particular patrol shift will know where his or her resources are deployed, and then we'll be able to see it. The officers themselves will also know where their other colleagues are at any given time. So that's a module that we hope to install in the coming year in 2013. We're waiting for the vendor to be able to work out some mapping issues. We hope to be one of the first departments that actually installs that. So that'd be
kind of neat.
That'll be kind of neat.
Yeah.
One of the other
And they do this in other places, other parts of the country?
Right. And one of the other modules that we hope, which is very costly, but we hope to be able to deploy, we have a new machine that automatically takes, what doesn't automatically take fingerprints, but what it digitizes fingerprints. The old days, we used to have to ink an individual's fingers and roll it on a card.
And
Now
that might or might not be accurate, correct?
Well, it's accurate, but there's a lot of technique involved, and it's almost an art to take good legible fingerprints.
That's what I understand.
Yeah, it is. Now you roll it without using any ink on a glass screen, and you look at the computer screen, and you can actually see the fingerprint
Right there.
appear right before you.
Wow.
And as a result of having that digitized system, you also have to input the individual's name and all the other identifying data into the system so it appears along with the fingerprint. Well, our internal management system doesn't talk to this other piece because the digital fingerprint system is a module in operation that's run by the state. And it doesn't communicate with our internal management system.
Okay.
So the officer has to put in all the information into our internal system and then go to the computer attached with the automatic fingerprint identification system and input it again. So we want to buy a module that will allow those
Do it
two
once.
systems to talk.
Yeah.
And we hope to cut down the amount of time an officer is in booking by almost 50%.
Yeah, I mean, because instead of doing it twice, the one time,
That's right.
which obviously makes a whole lot of sense.
That's right. And that's another way where we can demonstrate that technology is making us much more efficient. If we can reduce booking time, which sometimes takes around 45, 50 minutes, down to 15 or 20 minutes, that means that officer is back out on the street conducting deterrent preventative patrols or answering calls for service much, much quicker. And here again, that makes us more efficient and effective.
Now, do you have, some of these software requests in for your budget proposals this year?
We have some of them in the request, so we're hopeful that the folks look favorably upon that. And again, it is an effort to become more efficient and effective. I like to kind of use the analogy of stretching the rubber band. We're I'm trying to stretch that technology band as far as I can to allow us to be able to do what needs to get done with the staffing that we have. That means that in the past year, by using technology, we've eliminated a lot of paper forms. Instead of writing out certain activities on a piece of paper, the officers now use the mobile data terminals in their cars. It automatically goes into the system. We don't have to write things and we don't have to file things. We don't have to store things. It's already captured on the computer. So we can track where officers are and what they're doing. The sergeants that are running these various shifts can track, better track what their officers are doing by looking at their own mobile data terminal. And they can deploy their resources based on what they know they need to be accomplishing during their particular shift, whether it's deterrent patrol for burglaries during the daytime, whether it's highway safety patrols when the kids are going to school or coming home from school, whether it's addressing traffic accident issues on certain intersections where we know where accidents are occurring more frequently. All this technology is designed to make us more precise and allow us to deploy our resources in a more precision-oriented way.
Yeah. Now, and everybody who's watching this show will get to see us, as you were kind of giving me, I guess tour's the wrong word, a demonstration of some of the features of the new cruisers. So this seems like this is a huge goal, to have our whole department fully equipped with these new cruisers within, what, another year, 2 years?
It'll take us 3 cycles to get
3 cycles?
3 cycles of 3 cars to be able to deploy these new vehicles throughout the fleet. One, we have to be concerned about making sure that we extract all the utility out of the current Crown Victoria interceptors that we do have. And as the folks at home will see, after those vehicles reach a certain point, they become really inefficient to maintain on the road because it becomes too costly to maintain. But the new Crown Victoria, the new police interceptors that are replacing the Crown Victorias are much more fuel efficient. They come with a V6 engine, and there's more technology built into that car, and more importantly, more safety features built into that car to protect our officers.
The technology features are kind of awe-inspiring. I never even knew you could have all those kind of things in police cruisers.
It's their office. When we think about folks that are sitting in an office, either at work or at home, all those same features, all the same functionalities that they have at home or in their office, including heat and air conditioning, including comfort and safety, including technology, computers, and things of that nature, all need to be present in a package that it rolls down the road in a fuel-efficient way. And they have all the other accessories and other equipment with them should they need it. So they need to be prepared. They need to have, we have patrol rifles, we have patrol shotguns, we have medical kits, we have a whole host of other equipment.
You have defibs now too, don't you?
We have defibrillators. We're hoping to purchase at least 2 more to be able to have every car in the fleet equipped with an automatic defibrillator. So all this equipment has to be neatly packaged, and in this rolling office, that's not only effective and efficient, but also one that's safe for the officer to be in.
And that's paramount.
Right. They need to be able to get there safely. If they can't get to where they need to be safely, then the mission has failed. And so with all-wheel drive with these new cars, we hope to be able to be more effective during inclement weather. We do have some older model Ford Explorers that are four-wheel drive. Those are built on a truck chassis, and they're highly fuel inefficient. So we typically try not to use those only when there's very inclement weather, because they are relatively fuel inefficient. These new cars are all-wheel drive and very fuel efficient, so they'll be used throughout the year.
And there were some kind of neat features that, to be honest with you, as a layman, just an ordinary citizen, I would not have given any thought to, that is important to both safety and comfort as well, employee comfort of the offices. I mean, even when you mentioned things like the way the seats are designed, I mean, obviously I'm not walking around with one of those big belts that has a holster and all kinds of other equipment on it that obviously every one of our offices are walking around. What do these things weigh, like 60, 70 pounds, for crying out loud? They're so heavy.
Well, not quite that much, but they are pretty heavy.
They're heavy,
and they're bulky. And so
Yes.
were you to climb in a regular passenger car seat designed for folks that aren't wearing all that, it would become very uncomfortable.
It'd be horrible.
Because the holster and the weapon would interfere with the officer's ability to.
And it could be
to sit
unsafe
comfortably.
too, I would think. I
And
mean,
could
wouldn't
be
there be
unsafe.
the potential for, a discharge that wasn't supposed to happen, that kind of thing?
There's a lot of needs that have to be built
Yeah.
in. The ability to sit comfortably in a seat for long periods of time, to accommodate all the equipment, as well as hold the officer in place during pursuit driving activities.
Yep.
So all those needs have to be factored into the design, and also a piece of equipment that is going to stand up to the rugged use of 24/7, 365 police operations.
And another thing that you had pointed out too that and again, hadn't given thought to, but all of us have seen the news that, Fox News or somebody will run a clip that either came off a camera of a cruiser or somebody who happened to have a CAD cam or whatever and taped it, of, an officer maybe being pulled over to the side of the road on a stop or what have you, and somebody careening into them at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and you kind of go, oh, and you brought up the fact now that these new cruisers can take that kind of rear impact, and that so many of them do happen just because people either aren't paying attention or because they're watching the lights.
They get mesmerized by the lights,
Yeah.
and that does happen. There's been some studies actually about the correct placement of lights, the correct color of lights, the best way to alert the traveling and motoring public that there is an officer on the side of the road, but yet not draw them into the lights so that it causes a collision. And as the folks will see, these new Ford Police Interceptors are built to withstand the 75-mile-an-hour rear impact crash. So, God forbid that it should ever happen, but if it does, at least at the speeds and the roads around here in Bedford, our officers will be safe.
And it obviously has happened.
It has happened.
Seen it. I'd say probably every couple of weeks you see something on some TV channel of an incident like that happening someplace. And we do have highways, obviously, running through Bedford, so.
There is a lot of distracted driving that occurs,
Yeah.
and that's part of the problem. In fact, we are participating in a statewide operation, Bedford Police is, to combat distracted driving, because it does contribute to a lot of collisions, particularly rear-end collisions, when folks are distracted by paying attention to a cell phone or texting or doing something in the car that averts their attention from what they should be doing, and that is paying attention to driving a piece of equipment at a fairly good clip amongst a lot of other pieces of moving equipment. We sort of fall into that comfort zone that, sure, we can get in a car and it's designed with power steering, power brakes, and good handling, and we can circumnavigate just about any situation. But you're still driving a 3,000-pound missile down
That's
the
right.
road at a pretty good clip.
That's right.
And if we're not paying attention, all of a sudden we're off the road or we're into somebody else's trunk
That's
in
right.
the blink of an eye.
Well, I'll tell you, if I ever get elected queen, which of course won't happen, but should I ever get elected queen, one of the first dictates I will have is that anybody who is driving a car and is on the phone or is text messaging gets an automatic 15 days that in the Huska. So maybe I can help you out there. Well, you know, as usual, the time flies by fast. And we are going to continue because I know that there are lots of other technological issues that you want to talk about, and that's very important for people to recognize, because people do need to know what is going on with the Bedford Police Department and how you're staying with the times, because this all works into protecting us better and better, and giving us a better community. And I'll be honest with you. One of the things that I really want to be able to talk to you about in an upcoming show, and I'm kind of hoping that somebody will bar the door and not let you out till we set dates to tape the next couple. I really want to be able to get you in to talk about your budget proposals for the 2013, excuse me, year in Bedford, because this is the time of year when all this is going on. And I know that you've worked very hard to put your proposals together. Some of them the town manager agrees with. Obviously, she had to make some choices, so some of them she's not fully behind, which of course you understand because that's her job. But the end result is the town council. And what sways the town council the most is you, me, the people sitting out there, and so on. We have a lot to say about it. And as far as I'm concerned, I really want people in town to especially hear your budget proposals and what your needs are for the department. I don't want them only to hear what they'll hear at council workshop meetings or council meetings that, you know, whoop-de-doo, we're going to fund one more police officer or whatever. I want you to be able to tell it like it is, so to speak, on what we really need, so that we here in Bedford can say, you know what, we've got to back up that police department and we've got to speak loudly and clearly to the council. So I'm going to ask you if you'll be willing to come in and talk about that kind of stuff, because I absolutely positively know that there are more things that you need than are in the budget as it stands right now. I know that for sure. So will you come back?
Sure.
You will?
You bet.
All right. So before do I have to tell them by the door? I mean, even though you're a cop and got a gun and everything, can we set a date before you walk out the door for good today?
Sure, you bet.
All right. Maybe we
We'll
can
take care
run
of it.
these shows back to back. That would be my goal, that we can have these shows running so that people can follow the sequence right through. That sound?
That's great. That's a great opportunity to be able to get information data out there. I know that the opportunity that I had before the council to present the budget is a good opportunity, but this will be another opportunity to give folks another forum to hear the same data presented, so that perhaps more people are exposed to the information and the case that we make for what we believe is the best expenditure for every dollar in the budget here for the Bedford Police Department and the taxpayers.
And I mean, truth be told, and this is no slur against the council, even they'll say, there she goes again. No slur against them, but truth be told, most people don't really watch the council meetings. I mean, they just don't, or watch budget sessions. We have to hope that we're so engaging and personable that more people will watch us and listen, Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to be able to keep on telling it is like it is with you. Okay, so stay with us, because you will get to see some great footage of the brand new cruisers. And we are, as you heard, we will continue on with this particular series because there is a lot that needs to be told. And that's what this show is all about, telling it like it is. So once again, thank you for watching. And until next time, bye-bye. Well, we ended the show a couple of minutes ago to say we were going to do a little spurt outside here. And the reason for this is one of Bedford's brand new police cruisers. And if you look at this, I mean, is this something else or what? Does it make the old ones look antiquated and old-fashioned? I mean, I looked at this. I saw one of these going by me on Route 101 one day, and I was like, I want one. Not only are they, fully equipped and ready for today's technology and such, but they're pretty darn neat looking. So when, the chief and I were talking about doing another show, I said to him, so what do you think about bringing one of the cars over so that everybody in Bedford who hasn't seen one yet can see it, and you can tell us about all the neat parts of it? To which, here we are. So, tell me, this is fantastic. How long has this been on the road?
This has been on the road for about 2.5 months. This is a 2013 Ford Police Interceptor.
Yeah, neat.
It's equipped with a 285 horsepower V6 engine. The old Crown Victoria Police Interceptors were equipped with a 240 horsepower V8 engine. So not only is this more powerful, but it's also about 20% more fuel efficient.
Wow.
It also comes equipped with a 6-speed transmission, which also contributes to its fuel efficiency. And not only that, it's all-wheel drive. And so for all of us who live in the Northeast,
yes, for the winter, fantastic.
we know that this vehicle is going to be much more functional when the roads are slippery and wet. So not only are we looking at a more powerful package, but also one that's even more fuel efficient. And for 2014, Ford has even refined it even more. They have another engine option that produces yet more horsepower, be yet more efficiently. So when we look at cars in the future, we certainly look at fuel mileage. It's a lot more aerodynamic. This is a supervisor's car. It doesn't have the light bar in it, but it has all the functionality of the lights and everything incorporated in the vehicle, and I'll show you that a little bit later. A couple of other things that are important about this: it has it's heavy-duty everything. Heavy-duty suspension.
Yeah, it would have to be, wouldn't it?
That's right. This car really handles like a sports car. I've had it out on a number of different occasions, and it really, truly does hug the road extraordinarily well.
I bet.
And it's a very safe platform. Certainly one of the first things that we are concerned about is officer safety. This is the only vehicle, police vehicle out there that's crash tested, rear end crash tested up to 75 miles per hour.
Wow.
And if you recall, over the years there were a number of rear end collisions because folks get mesmerized by lights alongside the road. And what happens is that they drive right into the cruiser.
The cruises, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately there were a number of fatalities involving officers and troopers over the years. And so Ford has redesigned the platform to make sure that any rear end collision will protect the occupants in the car.
Makes sense.
So we have a push bumper.
Long overdue.
Long overdue is right.
Yeah, that push bumper is pretty neat.
Push bumper on the front of the car, and
how much can that actually push?
It'll push a fairly heavy vehicle. It won't push a large commercial vehicle, but it'll push most passenger cars as well as most pickup trucks. And the whole concept behind that is oftentimes it takes quite a bit of time for a tow truck to arrive. So we have a vehicle that's either disabled or in an accident. It's blocking 101. The traffic is backed up. People want to get through.
And creating maybe another emergency
Creating
situation.
another issue, and these cars can now come along and gently push the other car alongside to the side of the road without impacting any damage.
And even
to the
for a
cruiser.
breakdown, to make it safer for a resident.
That's
we've
exactly.
all had breakdowns at some point in our life.
That's exactly correct. One of the other neat features of this is that we've used a vinyl wrapping instead of paint. So rather than
I didn't realize that.
This is all vinyl wrapped.
Oh, neat.
And so after this car finishes its work as a marked police cruiser, it's relatively inexpensive to take this vinyl wrapping off, just buff it out, and
I can
put
come
it
down and buy a sporty little car like this for me?
And we'll put it back out on the road, and
Neat.
somebody like myself or the captain or one of the lieutenants will drive the car. Whereas in years past, when the cars were painted black and white, we'd have to repaint the car, which is another added cost.
Oh, sure.
So
that's going to be what? By these days, at least $1,000, if not more, right?
It was right around $1,000 to repaint the cars. So we're saving another couple $1,000 by using vinyl wrapping here. Kathy, why don't you just have a seat in our new cruiser?
Do you trust me that I won't want to turn the key and go racing down the driveway?
Absolutely.
This is nice. Do the guys and gals fight over who get to take this out of control every day?
They may, but they keep it a secret.
Yeah? This is nice.
A lot of technology in the car.
Now this is for the...
That's a spotlight there.
Okay.
That's a light that they use to illuminate things alongside the road.
Okay.
You can see that we have a brand new Panasonic Toughbook computer. That's a tablet computer.
Neat.
That actually can come out of the car and be used as a laptop. That's the first time that we've introduced...
So they can bring it right in on a call.
They can bring it in on a call.
Fantastic.
They can take it wherever they need to take it. It's locked into the cruiser by a key, and they can unlock it, take it out, and the screen flips right around and closes up just like a laptop.
Really?
So it's a dockable.
So this comes right down.
That comes right down. Yep. And
wow.
The keyboard stays, and then the actual laptop comes right out of the car. So that adds a greater degree of functionality to their work. A couple of other things that you see in the car.
And this would also allow, like you in the station, to be communicating directly with the officer in the cruiser, correct?
That's correct. They had the ability to communicate back and forth with communications by what we call chat. So we can actually send non-voice messages back and forth between headquarters and each cruiser.
So that would be important in a kind of a critical situation.
Absolutely.
You didn't want people monitoring.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you can monitor Bedford PD on the internet. It's out there. And this feature allows us to be able to have more secure communications with officers.
Yeah.
You can see on top of the dash, that's a forward and rear looking radar unit.
Neat.
So we can capture speeds of both oncoming
Now,
traffic.
is this the thing that they can actually, like, hold out the window?
It can be dismounted and moved around, and then there's one in the rear window as well. There's one back there.
Oh, all right.
You're sitting in a seat that has a steel back to it, so that
It's very comfortable.
They're designed so that officers, are specially designed for officers that are wearing utility belts with a lot of equipment on them, so that when they sit in the seat, they have the room and the ability to be a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, that's true, because even your own belts, and I mean, you know, sometimes you see these guys, and it's like, and the gals, probably the gals more so, because that's a lot of weight.
It's a lot of weight,
around
and
your waist.
it's bulky, and to be
Yes.
sitting in a car for 8 hours, this is their office, and
That's
their
right,
office
yeah.
has to be functional. It has to have all the tools, all our computer system, both our case management system, as well as a new piece of technology which we talked about before, is our department's intranet, which is an intelligence platform that allows us to get information out to the officers immediately right on the road. So, you know, that's another feature that's integrated in the car. This car is ready and equipped to go with what we call paperless summonsing in the future. The state will, we believe that Bedford may be one of the first communities, along with the state police, that'll transition into a system where officers will actually electronically and digitally create tickets in the car with a printer, and the data will go directly to the court system and back and forth. So it saves a lot of clerk time, and it's much more efficient.
Not to mention removes a lot of margin for error too.
And it does. That's correct.
Amazing. Now I would think that all of this equipment too must make it. And again, I'm not a technological wizard by not even a stretch of the imagination, but I would imagine that this kind of equipment also gives them the information they need quickly. For instance, if they stop somebody, I mean, you never know who it is you're stopping. It can be somebody who just kind of went over the white line, but it could also be somebody that there's all kinds of warrants out for. So all of these things gets that information to them instantly, correct?
It does.
Very much?
It does. There's a lot of officer safety functionality built into our system so that officers can query license plates. If there is a vehicle that's wanted or stolen, they'll automatically know before they even stop the vehicle that the individual may be wanted for a particular crime. And if they discover that, then certainly that allows them to be able to contact other officers for assistance, so that they have enough resources available to be able to effectively capture the individual.
Yeah, that's important. And I would imagine just here in Bedford, just, you know, the incident that we've had in the past week, that you certainly must have seen the importance and the benefit of some of this stuff.
Yeah, it is a vast improvement over the days when I first started, where essentially all you had was the radio and lights, and that was about it. And today,
walkie-talkie, basically, that might or might not work.
And oftentimes it didn't. In my case, years ago, it became more of an object to throw at someone than to communicate.
You're right. Yeah.
But in this case, this is a vehicle that officers can not only patrol, but also complete their reports. And the important aspect of that is that they remain visible and out in the community and available to answer other calls. So they don't have to
stuck in the station.
They don't have to go in the station. And the new department's intranet will also, in a short period of time, we hope, introduce some additional functionality so that they'll be able to actually access training and other types of material right through the computer in the car, so that rather than having again to come into the station and watch a training video, they'll be able to do it while they're still on patrol, being visible, parked in an area where they can remain a deterrent to crime. and other activity.
Sure, because visibility is everything, obviously.
Visibility is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah.
You know,
No
it's
question.
the guard dog effect, so to speak.
Sure. Sure.
And it really is very effective. So it is, we lease these cars because at the end of the 3-year lease, we will own the vehicle. The town of Bedford will own it. We will put it back into service, as I said before, once it leaves marked use, and we've derived all its use in that regard. It'll go into administrative use, and some of our lieutenants and command staff will drive these cars. But we're really looking for big fuel savings. We're looking for
Today, that's no small thing.
a car that's more adaptable to the environment, and particularly the winter time here in New Hampshire, being all-wheel drive. And because it's a better handling car, we believe that it'll be a much more safe platform for our officers
And
out
that's
in the
huge.
field.
Yeah,
And
that is huge.
And that is
Now, you
huge.
started out with, what, 3, right?
We started with 3.
Okay,
And,
what, the next year, more?
Yeah, next year we're requesting another 3 vehicles to be leased. We move our vehicles out of patrol use after they've put somewhere in the vicinity of 105 to 115 or 120,000 miles. Now,
And for a police cruiser, that's hard miles.
those are hard miles, and
It's not like, you know, the little old lady going to the supermarket every Sunday or something. You know?
right. Not only that, but what a lot of folks don't recognize is that we track mileage, but like most police cars that operate 24/7, these cars sit and idle for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
there may be 120 road miles on the
Yeah.
car. It may have the functional equivalent of 170 hours miles on the car,
Yeah, 'cause
meaning that
it's, yeah, it's not like they can pull over and turn the car off. I mean,
that's
they've got to be ready to rock
the
right
car
away. Yeah.
the car runs constantly, and as a result, while the running gear, suspension and so forth, isn't operating, but all the other accessories, the motor, alternator, the heating and cooling systems, radiators, continue to operate. So with 120,000 miles on the car, we know from experience that with any of these cars that have idled that many hours, we start to lose, and it starts to cost us a lot of money in terms of accessory pieces.
Sure.
Air conditioning compressors
It's good
start
you
to go.
mention that, because I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and probably most people wouldn't think of it. I mean,
Right,
your
because you-
average driver, why would you?
You
think
look
of
at
it?
mileage and you,
Yeah.
well, why would they be turning in a car with like 100,000 miles? Why couldn't you get 150,000 out of it? Well, it's idled the equivalent of probably 170,000 because it does run constantly. And the reason why it has to run constantly is because of the current draw for not only the radio system but the computers in the
Of
car.
course.
And it has to produce enough electricity to be able to operate those systems so the car runs. And plus it has to be climate controlled so that you have an officer that is ready to jump into action and not freezing, or one that
Yeah,
is overheated
exactly. Yeah.
from sitting in a black car in the middle of the summertime.
Exactly. And I mean, for practical purposes, if somebody went tearing by you, I mean, every second kind of counts.
Every
If
second.
you need to get on the road and be right behind that person tearing by you, you can't be fooling around starting the car and waiting for it to warm up and get the windshield wiper going or whatever.
Right.
You're going to be ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really neat. This is really neat.
So it's a great package. We look forward
Yeah.
to many years of good service from these units. And then the other factor is they are a bit stealthy. Folks are
They are.
looking for those Crown Victoria police cars for the
Yeah,
last
I
20
know,
years,
I know.
and oftentimes, particularly because they're not painted black and white, they're able to creep up on folks in an unsuspecting way. And
And they're quiet, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even hear you pulling in.
They're very quiet. They're very quiet. They're quiet on the inside as well. You know, the technology that Ford has put into these cars. There's safety straps, as you can see on the door.
Yes. Yeah, I noticed that.
Here, as I
Yeah.
said, the back of your seat has got a steel plate, so that if there were anyone in the back trying to
Kick.
use the sharp-edged
Yeah,
object,
yeah,
it would
yeah,
be prevented
yeah.
with a
Yeah,
piece of
because
steel.
that's another thing. People forget that there can be passengers back there
There sometimes
who
there
are
are.
on their way to someplace other than home.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's. Is there anything back there that is different that people need to know about, or just need to see out of curiosity?
This particular car, because it's a supervisor's car, doesn't have the containment unit in the back, so it's pretty much the same as a regular
Yeah, because
car.
there's usually bars or something, right?
Yeah,
so that
there's
they can't.
there's a shield that protects
Okay.
the prisoners in the back from the
Right,
occupants in
right,
the
from being
front.
able to do anything to an
But with
officer.
supervisors, we don't install it in this car.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, these are neat. Really nice. I'm so glad you brought one over.
Yeah, that's
because
great. A lot of functionality in the steering
Yes.
wheel. We're hoping that in the future we'll be able to integrate our radios so that much like you can operate your phone from the steering wheel, they'll be able to talk by simply pressing a
Right
button.
there?
Pressing a button with a microphone that'll be up here
Wow.
in the overhead, rather than having to grab
Yeah,
the
yeah,
microphone
yeah.
and hold the
'Cause
microphone.
do they still have to use this, right?
They still have to use this one, but we're hoping in future models we'll be able to integrate the radio system right into the functionality of the steering wheel so that they can keep their eyes and hands on the road.
Now, is that something that is already available?
It is available. It's an extra cost, but we think that the safety factor involved is worth the extra cost
I agree.
to keeping the officer safe.
Yeah, I agree. Because obviously, especially if they're going a high rate of speed, it's better that they have both hands on than
Absolutely.
having to use the mic.
And that's really the reason why.
Now, say for instance, you know, the largesse of the council was that they gave you more money than you wanted, which I don't think will happen, but you never know. Would these be able to be fitted with the newest, or would it be only the new ones that you would be able to do that with?
It would be too costly to go back and to try to reintegrate
Because they'd have
this
to
one.
take the whole steering wheel out and everything?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. But we're going to be looking at the 2014 models to see if we have enough funding to be able to install some additional safety features in those cars.
Now, you guaranteed the funding for the cruisers themselves?
These are leased, and the 2013 budget has a request in for 3 additional lease cars. We're
But that's still a wild card?
That's pending council approval and certainly the budget approval meeting by the town residents. But the reality is that the cars that we have online now, which are the older Crown Vics, they have reached the end of their useful life. And essentially what happens, there were a couple of the old cars that these replace where we actually didn't replace different pieces that had already failed. For example, one had an air conditioning compressor that failed. We didn't replace that. We just, even though it was fairly warm in September for a few days, we did suffer with riding with the windows down. And some other things that begin to fail, and we know that based on just for having these cars operates for so many years. So that if we keep a car past 115,000 or so, it becomes more of a maintenance cost to keep it than it is to get rid of it.
It's almost like throwing good money after bad at some point.
It really is.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of departments, some departments replace at as few miles as 75,000. Other departments at 100,000 use that sort of benchmark. We know from 105 to 115, 120 is usually when we replace ours. State Police, I believe, replaces their fleet at around 110 to 120,000. We all know about this. We all have the same experience with the same vehicle, so
Yeah, true. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, the safety aspect has to be paramount.
Safety aspect is paramount. You know, there's additional steel pieces in these doors. Again, the car
So these things are built for a lot more.
They're built for a lot
abuse.
of rugged use, and
Yeah.
everything about the car is heavy duty, from a heavy duty radiator, a high capacity alternator. It has an oil cooler, transmission cooler, different suspension pieces. It is all-wheel drive. It is crash tested to 75 miles an hour from the backside.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are integrated into this car. The airbags are designed so that they will deploy even when there's a partition that separates the front and the rear seats, so that the
That still
airbags will still protect the officers inside the car.
Now, this may be a totally stupid question. Maybe I watched too much NASCAR growing up or something. Do they put things like rollover bars in police cruisers or not?
Well, it's the same
standard.
standards as you find in
Same thing?
a standard vehicle to protect from rollover. There's steel pieces on the top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, stuff like that I wouldn't know a lot about. I mean, the design features are so different these days than they were not even that long ago.
Not even that long ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a dramatic improvement.
Yeah.
The Crown Vics were a great platform.
Yeah.
They served the American police community well
yeah, definitely.
for over 20 years, but it was time for a change, and the platform that Ford has introduced is one that takes into consideration aerodynamics and fuel efficiency. This is a flex fuel car, so you know, were we to consider using flex fuel in the future, it is adaptable for it. One of the other features in the dashboard, for example, is that it measures hours of use now as opposed to miles.
Really?
So it'll tell you how many hours the car is driven, and that's going to help our maintenance folks down at DPW have a better handle on when these cars need to be serviced.
Not to mention, have the town officials have a better understanding of when they need to be replaced.
That's right. Yeah, we'll know how many hours the cars are driven. You know, the aviation community has tracked hours as opposed to miles, if you will, for, you know, decades and decades. And now, and even in the commercial equipment side, for example, heavy-duty cranes and shovels and things of that nature that don't see road use are always tracked by hours. They have meters on them to track hours. And now we finally realize that because police units idle so much in regular use, that they really need to be tracked by hours instead of miles.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, this was fun. I'm so glad you brought this over. Neat. So if anybody, you know, is in Bedford and sees one of them pulled over, assuming that it's a safe time to do so, they could probably go peek in the window.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't mind, right?
We encourage our folks to come up and see the cars. It's their property. They paid for it. It's out there to protect them each and every day. It's the office for these officers from which they work from, and our job is to provide the most functional piece of equipment for the best dollar.
Well, I know too, you go out to a lot of the public events too, which gives people an opportunity to kind of see these things up close,
Right.
which is fun.
Yeah.
You know, sort of like when they have the touch-a-truck thing for the kids.
Yeah, it is a pretty neat a vehicle, and it's kind of neat to look at and kind of fun to sit in, and better to sit up front than it is in the back.
Oh, well, yes, yeah. I'll tell you, the first time I saw one drive by, I was like, wow, look at that, you know, because I didn't realize they were on the road yet. And they were so snazzy looking that, yeah, I mean, they really do catch your eye the minute you see one drive by.
Yeah.
They are neat.